Calla
Please
Rose
don't let it
Brennan
hurt,
had
Mom.
20 minutes to convince a stranger to believe the unbelievable, or her mother would go back inside that apartment and never come out alive. 20 minutes. That's how long Mama said they had at the hardware store while Preston was at work. For 13 months, since the bad man had moved into their home, Calla had been counting minutes. Minutes until he came home. Minutes until his voice got loud. Minutes until Mama stopped crying and went quiet, which was somehow worse. But these 20 minutes were different, because 3 spots over from their silver Honda, a very big man with a beard and a leather vest had just parked a motorcycle that looked like it belonged to someone who might, maybe, possibly be strong enough to make Preston stop. If you believe every child deserves someone who answers when the system won't, subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. What happened next would change everything. Please don't let him hurt Mommy. 6 words, written in purple crayon on a torn corner of a shopping list, folded 4 times until it was small enough to fit through the gap in a leather saddlebag's zipper. 6 words that Calla Rose Brennan pushed into a stranger's motorcycle bag while her mother compared paint samples inside Lowe's hardware store, unaware that her 5-year-old daughter had just made a decision that would either save both their lives or make everything so much worse. The note sat there in the dark of that saddlebag for 7 minutes while Calla walked back to her mother with shaking hands, her purple crayon clutched in her overall pocket like a talisman. The same crayon she'd been carrying every single day for 6 weeks, not knowing why. Just knowing it made her feel safer. Inside the store, Rachel Marie Brennan moved through the paint aisle the way she moved everywhere now. Carefully, quietly, like someone navigating around invisible pain. Her left hand stayed close to her ribs, where 3 fractures were healing wrong because she hadn't been allowed to see a doctor. Her right forearm, still tender from a spiral fracture 17 days old, hung at her side in a protective position she'd learned to hide under long sleeves, even when it was 89 degrees outside. She wore sunglasses indoors, a sage green cardigan buttoned to her throat in late August heat. High-waisted jeans loose enough to hide the bruises on her hips, where he'd shoved her against the kitchen counter 9 days ago after she'd tried to take Calla to her mother's house. And every 30 to 45 seconds, her eyes tracked to the store entrance, checking if he'd followed them, checking the wall clock, calculating how much time they had left before he expected them home. Calla watched her mother the way she watched everything now, with the hypervigilance of a child who'd learned that safety was temporary and could end with a text message buzz or a door slam or the sound of his truck in the parking lot. But today, Calla had done something. She'd acted. And now all she could do was wait and see if the big man with the skull patches on his vest was one of the good ones, or if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her very short life. 2:43 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Gideon Vance, called Reaper by every man who rode with him and most people who knew better than to call him anything else, opened his left saddlebag to store the wood stain he'd just purchased. His hand stopped halfway to setting the can inside. There was something in his bag that hadn't been there 30 minutes ago when he'd parked. A small piece of paper, folded tight, barely bigger than a business card. He pulled it out. Unfolded it once, twice, 3 times, 4, and read 6 words written in purple crayon, the letters shaky and uneven, the handwriting of someone very young who was still learning to control the pressure. Please don't let him hurt Mommy. Reaper's jaw tightened. His hand, The same hand that had gripped a fireplace poker at age 6 trying to save his own mother from his father's rage. The same hand that hadn't been strong enough then, that had failed when it mattered most, closed carefully around the note. He didn't say anything out loud. There was no one to say it to. But in his head, to the child who'd written this, wherever she was, whoever she was, he made a promise the way he wished someone had made one to him 48 years ago. I won't. I promise you that. He scanned the parking lot. Families loading groceries. An elderly couple arguing about which car they'd parked in. A teenage employee pushing a line of shopping carts. And then he saw them. A woman. Thin, too thin, moving with a slight protective lean to her left, exiting the hardware store holding a little girl's hand. The woman's shoulders were hunched forward, even though she wasn't carrying anything heavy. The child's eyes tracked to the store entrance, looking for someone who wasn't there yet. They walked toward a silver Honda Civic. 3 spots from his bike. The child looked at his motorcycle. Her eyes went wide. Recognition. Their eyes met for exactly 1.5 seconds. Reaper held up the note, small enough that only she could see the purple writing. The little girl's hand flew to her mouth. The mother didn't notice. She was checking her phone, her face tightening at whatever she saw there. Reaper folded the note carefully, placed it in his vest pocket over his heart, and walked the 20 feet to the Honda. He crouched down to the child's eye level. Non-threatening position. Hands visible. Voice quiet. Did you write this? The little girl nodded. Couldn't speak. Is Mommy hurt? Another nod. Tears forming in hazel eyes that had seen too much. Where? The child pointed to her own ribs, then her wrists, then her forearm, showing him a map of pain on her mother's body that she'd memorized, because 5-year-olds who live with violence learn anatomy the hard way. Is he home right now? She shook her head no, then whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. He's at work. We have 20 more minutes. What's your name, darling? Kala. Even quieter. That's my mama, Rachel. The bad man is Preston. Reaper felt something crack open in his chest. This child was 5 years old, and she'd just used the words bad man with the same certainty most kids her age used to describe monsters under the bed. Except her monster had a name, and he was real, and he was waiting for them at home. Kala, I need you to listen. I'm going to help your mama, but I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that? The whisper came back, breaking on every word. He said if Mama tries to leave again, he'll make sure I never see her. I don't want to never see her. The fireplace poker memory flashed through Reaper's mind, his mother's face turning purple, his father's hand around her throat. The moment he'd swung that iron rod with everything a 6-year-old could generate, and it hadn't been enough, would never be enough, had cost his mother 90% vision in her left eye for the rest of her life because her son couldn't protect her. But this time was different. This time, he was strong enough. You're not going to lose her. I promise you that. Rachel finally noticed the large man in the leather vest crouching next to her daughter. She moved fast, protective instinct overriding the pain in her ribs, stepping between Kala and this stranger, her voice tight with the particular panic of a woman who'd learned that danger could wear any face. Kala, what did you— Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she shouldn't have bothered you. Reaper stood slowly. 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle and road-worn leather, and a beard going gray at the edges. He held up the purple crayon note where Rachel could see it. Ma'am, your daughter didn't bother me. She asked me for help. And I'm asking you now. Are you in danger? Rachel's eyes locked on the note, on her daughter's handwriting. on the 6 words Calla had written without telling her. Her hands started shaking. I can't. He'll know I talked to someone. He tracks my phone. I have to go home. How long has he been hurting you? The question landed like a physical thing. Rachel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then she broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet collapse of all the walls she'd been holding up for 13 months. 13 months. I've tried to leave 4 times. He'll kill me if I try again. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the kind of confession that only comes when someone finally asks the right question. He has money. He has lawyers. He has everyone fooled. No one believes me. The police came 4 times and did nothing. I believe you. Rachel looked up. No one had said that to her in 13 months. Not the police who'd suggested marriage counseling. Not the officers who'd noted conflicting stories and left. Not the neighbors who'd heard screaming and convinced themselves it wasn't their business. Not the teachers who'd documented Calla's reports and filed them away. No one. Until a stranger in a Hell's Angels vest, standing in a hardware store parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, said 2 words that every abuse victim needs to hear and almost never does. Her voice cracked. He's going to kill me. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but soon. And then he'll take Calla and take the money, and no one will stop him because everyone thinks he's a good man. What's his full name? Preston Harland. He's a property manager, volunteer firefighter, youth baseball coach. Everyone loves him. Reaper's expression didn't change. Not everyone. He took off his right glove, extended his hand to Calla. She placed her tiny hand in his, her entire hand disappearing in his grip. He knelt one more time, looked her in the eye. You did the right thing, writing that note. You saved your mama's life today. Do you understand that? Calla whispered. Are you a good man or a bad man? The question punched through 48 years of his own history. I'm a man who keeps promises, and I promise you this, he will never hurt your mama again. He shook her hand gently. A handshake of a promise made to a child who'd learned that adults lie. But Calla looked in his eyes, and for the first time in 11 months, she believed someone. What Calla and Rachel didn't know. In 17 minutes, Reaper would make 1 phone call. In 43 minutes, the first motorcycles would arrive. In 91 minutes, 83 Hell's Angels would surround Preston Harland's apartment building in a formation so tight, so disciplined, so overwhelming that every neighbor within 3 blocks would become a witness. And in 2 hours and 6 minutes, a man who'd spent 9 years hiding behind a volunteer firefighter badge and a property manager's smile would be face down on asphalt, with his hands zip-tied behind his back, screaming about his rights while evidence of 2 separate murder plots and $467,000 in stolen money was being photographed by federal agents who'd been trying to build this case for 8 months. But none of that had happened yet. Right now, it was 2:47 p.m. on a Sunday. Rachel had 13 minutes before Preston expected her home, and Reaper had 13 minutes to make sure she understood she didn't have to go back. Not today. Not ever again. Listen to me very carefully, Reaper said, his voice low and steady. You're going to drive home. You're going to walk inside. You're going to act like nothing happened. Can you do that? Rachel's breath hitched. I don't understand. In exactly 1 hour, help is coming. A lot of help. But I need you safe until then. I need you to be exactly where he expects you to be, so he doesn't suspect anything. 1 hour, Rachel. Can you hold on for 1 more hour? She looked at Calla. At this stranger who'd promised her daughter something impossible. at the note still in his hand. What are you going to do? What should have been done 13 months ago? He handed her a small card, plain white, no logo, just a phone number written in black ink. If anything changes, if he escalates, if you feel unsafe for even 1 second before we get there, you call that number. It goes straight to me. You understand? Rachel nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. 1 hour, Reaper repeated. And then this ends. At 2:51 p.m., Rachel Brennan pulled into the parking lot of 847 Maple Ridge Court, Unit 14B, with exactly 7 minutes to spare. Preston's truck wasn't there yet. She had 7 minutes to stop shaking, 7 minutes to make her face neutral, 7 minutes to hide the hope that was trying to bloom in her chest and would get her killed if he saw it. Calla sat in the back seat, silent, gripping her purple crayon so hard her knuckles were white. Mama? Yeah, baby? The man with the motorcycle. He promised. I know. Do you think he meant it? Rachel met her daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe it so badly it hurt. But she'd been disappointed too many times. I don't know, Calla. But we're going to find out. At 2:58 p.m., they walked inside the apartment. At 3 p.m. exactly, Preston's truck pulled into his parking space. He walked in smiling, carrying takeout, asking how their trip to the store went. Rachel smiled back. Calla said nothing. She hadn't spoken in his presence in 5 months, and she wasn't starting now. And for the next 53 minutes, Rachel Brennan did what she'd been doing for 13 months. She survived. 2:52 p.m., 43 miles away. Reaper's bike roared to life in the hardware store parking lot. He didn't head home. He pulled onto Highway 96, pushed the throttle, and rode straight toward Iron Valley, the clubhouse, where 23 of his brothers were spending a quiet Sunday afternoon, working on bikes, watching football, living the kind of peaceful day that was about to end. He made one call on his headset. It rang twice. Iron, it's Reaper. Marcus Stitch Cole, club vice president, former Army combat medic who'd done 3 tours in Iraq and had seen enough broken bodies to know when someone was running out of time, heard something in Reaper's voice that made him stand up from the pool table and walk away from the game. Every brother within 50 miles. Clubhouse. Now. What's the situation? Child. Abuse. Evidence. Stitch didn't ask for details, didn't ask for proof, didn't waste time with questions that didn't matter. We're rolling. The call lasted 11 seconds. What happened in the next 8 minutes was a masterclass in efficiency. Stitch walked into the clubhouse common room, where 17 brothers were scattered across couches and poker tables and tool benches. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Emergency ride. Child in danger. Everybody available, gear up now. Chairs scraped back. Cards were dropped mid-hand. Wrenches were set down. Within 90 seconds, 17 men were pulling on their cuts. Leather vests bearing the hellsangels insignia, each one worn and road-tested and carrying the weight of brotherhood that didn't require explanation. By the time Reaper pulled into the Iron Valley Clubhouse parking lot at 3:04 p.m., 23 motorcycles were already lined up, engines idling, brothers waiting. No questions asked, just, what do you need, and where are we going? Reaper killed his engine, dismounted, pulled the purple crayon note from his vest pocket, and held it up where everyone could see. 5-year-old girl wrote this. and put it in my saddlebag while I was in a hardware store. Her name is Calla. Her mother's name is Rachel. The man hurting them is named Preston Harland, 41, property manager, lives at 847 Maple Ridge Court, Unit 14B, Murfreesboro. He didn't need to say more, but he did anyway, because these men deserved to know exactly what they were riding into. Rachel's been trying to escape for 13 months. 4 failed attempts. Police called 4 times. They did nothing. Preston's a volunteer firefighter, youth baseball coach, church member. Everyone thinks he's a good man. He's not. He's planning to kill her, take custody of the kid, and steal a $267,000 wrongful death settlement from Rachel's late husband. Leonard Badge Torres, 52 years old, retired sheriff's deputy with 24 years on the job and a lot of opinions about cops who didn't do their jobs, stepped forward. You said police were called 4 times? 4 times. No arrests. He's got credentials and charm, and he knows exactly how to play the system. Badge's jaw tightened. Then the system's done. We're up. Nathan Frost Erickson, 44, former child protective investigator who'd burned out after 9 years of watching kids slip through cracks in a system designed to catch them, spoke next, his voice quiet but carrying across the parking lot. The 5-year-old, Calla. Is she hurt? Physically? Not that I saw. Emotionally? Reaper paused. She hasn't spoken in his presence in 5 months. She wrote me a note because she's watched every adult in her life fail to protect her mother. She's 5 years old and she's using the word never correctly in a sentence about losing her parent. Frost closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When he opened them, his expression had shifted into something colder. I'm in. Isaiah Prophet Washington, 55, club chaplain, theology degree collecting dust while he served a different kind of ministry, crossed his arms. What's the play? Rachel and Calla are back at the apartment right now. Preston doesn't know anything happened. They've got... Reaper checked his watch. 47 minutes to act normal before we arrive. Our job is to create presence. Enough presence that every neighbor, every passerby, every person in a 3-block radius becomes a witness. We surround that building. We make it impossible for him to act, impossible for him to run, and impossible for law enforcement to ignore. David Cypher Miller, 39, former IT security consultant who'd left corporate America because he was tired of protecting rich people's money and wanted to protect something that actually mattered, raised his hand. We need his digital footprint, financial records, search history, communications. If he's planning what you say he's planning, he left evidence. That's exactly what I need you for, Reaper said. Soon as we're staged, you're going through every device we can access legally. Marcus Stitch spoke up, his combat medic training kicking in. Rachel's injuries. You said ribs, wrists, forearm? How bad? 3 rib fractures, 9 days old. Rope burns on both wrists from being zip-tied. Spiral fracture on her right forearm, 17 days old, healing wrong because he wouldn't let her see a doctor. Stitch's expression went flat. That particular kind of calm that combat medics learn when they're treating someone who's been hurt deliberately, systematically, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I'll need to photograph everything. Medical documentation for the prosecution. She'll let you, Reaper said. She's terrified, but she wants this to end. A younger brother, called Hammer, 28, 6'5", and built like the nickname suggested, stepped forward. How many bodies you want? Reaper looked around at the brothers assembled. 23 here, but he needed more. I want every chapter within 2 hours' reach. I want enough motorcycles that when we roll up it looks like an army, because that's what it's going to take to make this stick. Badge pulled out his phone. I'll call Mountain Ridge chapter. They've got 18 active. Frost. Granite State owes us. That's another 12. Profit. Bayou Brothers are 40 minutes south. I can get 20. Cipher. Pacific Coast is running a charity ride today, but I can pull 15 from the route. Stitch did the math in his head. That's 88 total, including us, minus the ones who can't make it in time. We're looking at 75 to 83 bodies. Reaper felt something settle in his chest. 83. An odd number. Specific. Real. Not some mythological 100. Not a symbolic 50. 83 Hell's Angels, converging on one apartment building to protect one woman and one child that the system had failed 4 times. 83 is perfect, Reaper said. Make the calls. Now you might be thinking, 83 bikers? That's going to be chaos. That's going to be violence. That's going to make everything worse. And maybe, years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But these men weren't 25 anymore. They were fathers, grandfathers, veterans, professionals, men who'd spent decades learning that real power isn't loud, it's controlled, disciplined, precise. When 83 motorcycles roll up in perfect formation, park without a single rev of theatrics, and 83 men stand silent in matching cuts, that's not a riot. That's a statement. And Preston Harland was about to receive it. 3:17 p.m. The first 4 motorcycles arrived. They parked across the street from 847 Maple Ridge Court, engines cutting off in near unison. 4 men in leather vests, standing next to their bikes, not moving, not shouting, just present. A neighbor walked by, slowed down, kept walking. Someone in Unit 9A, Marcus Webb, 34, delivery driver who worked nights and was home during the day, looked out his window and saw the bikes. Then saw 4 more pull up. Then 6 more. By 3:34 p.m., there were 20 motorcycles staged around the building. By 3:47 p.m., the number had grown to 41. And by 3:52 p.m., 83 Hell's Angels stood in a perimeter so tight, so organized, so clearly intentional that every single person in a 3-block radius stopped what they were doing and stared. Not one bike out of place, not one brother out of position. Military precision. And in Unit 14B, Preston Harland had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. Inside the apartment, 3:53 p.m. Rachel sat on the couch, her phone in her lap. Preston in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. He was humming. Actually humming. Some country song she didn't recognize, completely at ease, completely certain that his life was proceeding exactly according to plan. Calla sat next to Rachel, not watching TV, just staring at the door. Rachel's hand found her daughter's, squeezed once. 1 more minute, baby. Just 1 more minute. At 3:55 p.m., Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We're here. When you're ready, walk outside. You're safe now. Rachel's breath caught. Preston called from the kitchen. Who's texting you? She had exactly 3 seconds to decide. Tell the truth and risk him escalating immediately. Or lie and buy 30 more seconds. Just a spam text, deleting it. Good. You know I don't like you talking to people I don't know. I know. That's why I stopped telling you about the people I talk to. She stood slowly, careful not to wince from the rib pain. I'm going to take Calla outside for a few minutes. She's been cooped up all day. Preston looked up from his sandwich, eyes narrowing. Why? Just some fresh air. We'll be right outside the building. He studied her face, looking for the lie. looking for the hesitation. Rachel had practiced this face for 13 months. She knew how to make it blank. 10 minutes, then back inside. Understand? Understood. She took Calla's hand, walked to the door, opened it, stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, and stopped cold. 83 motorcycles. 83 men in leather cuts, forming a perimeter around her building so complete that there was no exit Preston could take that wasn't covered. Reaper stood in the center, 20 feet from her doorway. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once, told you. 1 hour. Rachel's knees nearly gave out. Calla whispered, "Mama, look. He brought his friends." And for the first time in 13 months, Rachel Brennan allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was actually ending. Reaper walked forward slowly, hands visible, voice calm. "Rachel, you're safe. I need you to tell me everything starting from the beginning. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He moved in 9 months ago, 4 months after my husband died. I got a settlement, $267,000. He convinced me to put him on the account. He's been transferring money out. I think he's planning to kill me and take Calla." Frost stepped forward, the former child protective investigator, the one who'd seen this exact pattern 17 times in his career and failed to stop it 12 of those times because the system moved too slow. He knelt to Calla's level. "Hey, sweetheart. My name is Nathan, but everyone calls me Frost. Is it okay if I talk to you for a minute?" Calla looked at her mother. Rachel nodded. Calla whispered, "Okay." "You wrote a very brave note today. Can you tell me why?" "Because Mama called the police, and they didn't help. And I heard Preston on the phone talking about when it's time and the funeral, and I didn't understand all the words, but I knew they were bad words." Frost's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. "When did you hear him say that?" "Last week. He was in the bedroom. I was in the hallway. He didn't know I was listening." "You did exactly the right thing, Calla. You're very, very brave." She looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. "Are you going to make him stop?" "Yes." "Promise?" "I promise." Badge, the ex-sheriff's deputy, approached Rachel with a notepad. "I need to ask you some hard questions. About the police calls, about the failed escape attempts, about everything that didn't work. Can you walk me through it?" Rachel's voice shook, but she talked. And as she talked, Badge wrote. And with every detail, his jaw got tighter. The first institutional failure. The teacher. Rachel explained how 4 months ago, Calla had told her kindergarten teacher, Jennifer Kowalski, that Preston makes Mama cry. The teacher had documented it, called Rachel in for a parent conference, asked if everything was okay at home. But Preston had been standing right next to Rachel during that conversation, his hand on her shoulder, his thumb pressing into the exact spot where a bruise was still healing. And Rachel, terrified of what would happen when they got home, had smiled and said, "Calla has a big imagination. We're fine." The teacher had accepted that answer, filed the report, done nothing else. Because without the mother confirming abuse, without visible injuries on the child, her hands were tied. Badge wrote it down. Failure number 1. Institutional policy prioritizes parental confirmation over child testimony. The second institutional failure. The police. First call. 6 months ago, Rachel had called 911 from a neighbor's phone. 2 officers had arrived. Preston had answered the door, calm, collected, and handed them proof that Rachel was drunk, a vodka bottle he'd forced down her throat 20 minutes before they arrived. The officers had smelled the alcohol, suggested marriage counseling. Left. Rachel had been locked in the bedroom for 18 hours as punishment. Badge's handwriting got messier. Failure number 2. Officers believed perpetrator's narrative without investigating evidence of coercion. The third institutional failure. The neighbor, Marcus Webb, the delivery driver in Unit 9A, had seen Preston drag Rachel back inside the apartment at 3 a.m. during her first escape attempt 7 months ago. He'd seen her drop a grocery bag, seen eggs break on the sidewalk, seen her crying while Preston smiled. He'd called the police. They'd done a wellness check. Preston had been charming. Rachel had been terrified into silence. No arrest. Marcus had felt guilty ever since, but he didn't know what else to do when the system that was supposed to help had looked the other way. Badge added it to the list. Failure number 3. Witness reports without victim cooperation, insufficient for intervention under current protocols. The fourth institutional failure. The system's design. Rachel had tried to leave 3 times. Each time, Preston had reported her car stolen or called CPS threatening to report her as unfit or used his volunteer firefighter connections to track her down. Each time, the system had worked exactly as it was designed. Slowly, carefully, requiring proof beyond reasonable doubt, protecting the rights of the accused. And each time, that slow, careful process had given Preston exactly the time he needed to punish her and tighten his control. Badge looked up from his notepad, met Reaper's eyes. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. It's just designed for the wrong outcome. Reaper nodded. Then we bypass it. 3:58 p.m. Stitch, the combat medic, approached Rachel with a first aid kit and a camera. I need to document your injuries. Photographs for evidence. Is that okay? Rachel nodded. Stitch worked quickly, professionally, his medic training overriding any emotional reaction. He photographed the rope burns on her wrists, the bruises on her hips, the way she couldn't lift her right arm above shoulder height without wincing. He took notes in medical shorthand. 3 healing rib fractures, lateral left side, approximately 9 days post-injury, consistent with blunt force trauma from counter edge. Ligature marks both wrists, 4 days old, pattern consistent with zip tie restraint. Spiral fracture right radius, 17 days old, healing malpositioned, indicates delayed/denied medical care. When he was done, he looked at Rachel and said quietly, You're going to be okay. We've got you. She believed him. Inside Unit 14. 4 p.m. Preston Harland finished his sandwich, checked his watch. 10 minutes had passed. Rachel and Calla should be back inside by now. He walked to the window, pulled the curtain back 1 inch, and looked outside. And froze. 83 motorcycles. 83 men in leather. Surrounding his building, and standing in the center of them, talking to Rachel, was a man built like a nightmare and wearing a cut that said hellsangels across the back. Preston's brain stuttered. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't in the plan. He grabbed his phone, dialed his attorney. No answer. Dialed again. Voicemail. He looked out the window again. One of the bikers, an older man with gray in his beard, was looking directly at his window. Preston stepped back. His hands were shaking. For the first time in 9 years of running this game. First with Christine, now with Rachel. Preston Harland felt something he hadn't felt since he was 12 years old, and his father had caught him stealing from the church donation box. Fear. At 4 p.m. exactly, Reaper knocked on the door of Unit 14B. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The kind of knock that says, "I know you're in there, and you know why I'm here." 30 seconds passed. The door opened. Preston Harland stood there in khaki pants and a polo shirt with the Riverbend Property Group logo. Clean-shaven, hair styled, cologne. Wedding ring on his finger, even though he'd never married Rachel. He looked like exactly the kind of man other men trusted. But Reaper had been reading men like Preston for 30 years, and he saw exactly what was underneath the smile. "Can I help you?" Preston's voice was friendly, confused, the voice of a man who had no idea why there were 83 motorcycles outside his building. Reaper didn't return the smile. "Preston Harland?" "That's me. What's this about?" "This is about Rachel, and Calla, and 13 months of abuse that ends today." Preston's smile didn't falter. "Not yet." "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. Your girlfriend and her daughter are outside right now. They're safe. And you're going to answer some questions." Now the smile slipped. Just for 1 second. 1 second was enough. "I'd like to call my attorney." "You're welcome to do that. But first you're going to stand right here and explain why Rachel has 3 broken ribs, rope burns on her wrists, and a spiral fracture that you wouldn't let her get treated." Preston's face shifted. The charm dropped like a mask falling off. What replaced it was cold, calculated, angry. "You have no authority here. This is private property. You're trespassing. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." Reaper stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. "Call them. I'll wait." Preston pulled out his phone, dialed 911. And that's when Badge stepped into the doorway, holding up his retired sheriff's badge. "Before you do that, Mr. Harland, you should know that Murfreesboro PD is already en route, and so is the FBI, because what we've uncovered in the last hour suggests you're not just abusing Rachel, you're running a financial fraud scheme that crosses state lines." Preston's hand froze mid-dial. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Cayman Islands, ELLC, Harland Property Consulting. $84,000 transferred in increments under $10,000 to avoid IRS reporting. Ring any bells?" Preston's face went white, and that's when Cypher stepped forward, holding a laptop. "Found his cloud backup. Browser history includes searches for undetectable poisons, staging suicide scene, and Tennessee non-parent custody laws. Dates match up with Rachel's timeline. He's been planning this for months." Preston didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there while his entire carefully constructed world collapsed in real time. And at 4:06 p.m., 2 Murfreesboro Police Department cruisers pulled into the parking lot, followed 3 minutes later by an unmarked sedan with federal plates. The FBI had arrived. The neighbors started coming out. Not all at once. Not in a rush. Just slowly, cautiously, the way people emerge when something unusual is happening on their street, and they need to see it for themselves. Gladys Marchand, 67, retired elementary school teacher from Unit 12B, directly below Rachel and Preston's apartment, stepped onto her balcony and stared at the sea of motorcycles. She'd heard furniture moving through her ceiling for 11 months. She'd heard raised voices at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., every Tuesday, like clockwork. She'd called the police once, 4 months ago, and they'd done nothing. She'd seen Rachel with a visible limp 3 weeks ago, asked if she was okay, and Rachel had said, "I'm fine," in the voice people use when they're very much not fine, but can't say so out loud. Gladys had gone back inside, told herself it wasn't her business, and felt sick about it every single day since. Now she stood on her balcony, watching 83 men in leather vests stand in perfect formation, and realized that someone had finally done what she'd been too afraid to do. Someone had helped. 4:08 p.m. Officer Derek Portman, 41 years old, Murfreesboro PD, the same officer who'd responded to 2 of Rachel's 4 calls and left both times without making an arrest, pulled his cruiser into the parking lot and saw the bikers. His partner, Officer Amy Harper, whistled low. "That's a lot of Hell's Angels." "That's 83 Hell's Angels," Portman corrected, counting quickly. "And they're not moving, not shouting, just standing there." "That's almost scarier." Portman killed the engine, stepped out, walked toward the crowd, hand nowhere near his weapon because these men weren't giving him a reason to reach for it. Badge met him halfway, held up his retired sheriff's badge. "Leonard Torres, 24 years, Shelby County Sheriff's Department, retired 2018. You're Portman." The officer blinked. "How did you—" "Because you responded to 2 domestic violence calls at this address, 4 months ago and 3 months ago. Both times you filed reports as verbal argument, no arrest warranted. Both times you left a woman with broken bones and a 5-year-old child in a house with a man who's planning to murder them." Portman's face went pale. "I didn't have enough. You had a victim with visible injuries and a perpetrator with a rehearsed story. What you didn't have was the willingness to look past his volunteer firefighter badge and see what was actually happening." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Badge's voice stayed level, but something in it cut deep. "You want to talk about fair? Rachel Brennan called for help 4 times. 4 times, Derek. And you know what happened? She got marriage counseling suggestions. She got told there were conflicting stories. She got sent back inside with a man who'd just broken her ribs." Portman had no answer. Badge pointed to Rachel, standing 20 feet away with Calla, surrounded by 6 Hell's Angels forming a protective circle. "You see that woman? She weighs 117 pounds because she's lost 21 pounds since the abuse escalated. She has 3 healing rib fractures. Rope burns on both wrists from being zip-tied to a door. A spiral fracture on her forearm that's healing wrong because he forbade her from getting medical care. And you left her there, twice. I followed protocol. Protocol failed her 4 times, so we're here to make sure it doesn't fail her a 5th time." Officer Harper stepped forward, quieter. "What exactly are we looking at here?" "Domestic violence, financial fraud, possible conspiracy to commit murder, and evidence that suggests this isn't his first victim." Portman's stomach dropped. "First victim?" "We'll get to that," Badge said. "But right now you need to secure the scene because the FBI is going to want to talk to everyone." 4:11 p.m. The unmarked federal sedan stopped behind the police cruisers. Special Agent Caroline Rivera, 39 years old, FBI Financial Crimes Unit, 8 years in, currently working a multi-state inheritance fraud case that had gone cold 6 months ago when the primary suspect vanished into offshore accounts, stepped out and surveyed the scene. 83 motorcycles. One very nervous-looking property manager standing in his doorway. And a woman with a child, surrounded by bikers, looking like she'd just been pulled from a burning building. Rivera walked straight to Badge. "Special Agent Rivera, FBI. Who's in charge here?" Badge gestured to Reaper. "That would be him." Reaper stepped forward, extended his hand. Rivera shook it, noting the calluses, the scars on his knuckles, the road dust still on his vest. Agent Rivera, I understand you have information relevant to a federal investigation? Depends on what you're investigating. Financial fraud? Offshore accounts? Inheritance schemes targeting vulnerable women? Ring any bells? Reaper's eyes narrowed. Preston Harland? Rivera's expression shifted. Surprise, then something harder. How long has your office known about him? The question landed exactly the way it was supposed to. Rivera paused. 6 months. We've been building a case, legally, carefully, by the book. And while you built it, Rachel Brennan was still inside that apartment, getting her bones broken. Rivera had no good response to that, because it was true. The system had moved slowly, necessarily, legally, properly, and in that slowness, Rachel had been punished 4 more times, isolated further, brought closer to the edge of murder. Reaper let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then, we got her out in 63 minutes. You had 6 months. Rivera's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Because what could she say? What do you have? Reaper gestured to Cypher, who stepped forward with his laptop. Preston Harland's cloud backup, browser history, financial records, communications, all accessed legally from devices he left unsecured. Rivera reviewed the screen. Her eyes widened. Searches for undetectable poisons dated to 5 weeks ago. Staging suicide scene dated to 3 weeks ago. Tennessee non-parent custody laws dated to 2 months ago. Bank transfer records showing $84,400 moved in increments under $10,000. Cayman Islands LLC formation documents. And this was the piece that made Rivera's breath catch. A second set of transfer records. From 2010, different victim name, Christine Elaine Harland. Different account. Same pattern. Rivera looked up. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 6 months. If this is authenticated, and I'll need to verify every piece of it, it changes the scope of the charges significantly. Reaper crossed his arms. I have one condition. I'm listening. Rachel gets a victim advocate assigned before the first interview. Nobody talks to her without her asking first. And whatever happens to Preston Harland happens fast, not after another month of paperwork while he's out on bail planning his next move. Rivera considered. Nodded. The advocate I can do immediately. The timeline depends on the evidence. But if what you're showing me holds up, he won't make bail. Not with flight risk and a previous victim pattern. Good enough. Rivera turned to her vehicle, pulled out her phone, made 3 calls in rapid succession. By 4:19 p.m., 2 more federal vehicles were en route. A forensic accountant, a victim services coordinator, and an assistant U.S. attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. The net was closing. 4:23 p.m. Marcus Webb, the delivery driver from Unit 9A, who'd witnessed Preston dragging Rachel back inside 7 months ago, stood in his doorway, watching everything unfold. Frost approached him, gentle but direct. Marcus Webb? Marcus jumped. Yeah. How do you know my name? Rachel mentioned you, said you called the police once, tried to help. Marcus's face crumpled. I did. They didn't do anything, and I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry, I should have. Tell me what you saw. Marcus took a breath, started talking. Marcus Webb, 34, delivery driver, Unit 9A, lived across the courtyard with a direct sightline to Rachel and Preston's apartment. What he saw. 7 months ago, 3 in the morning. I work nights, so I'm usually up. I heard a car start, looked out my window and saw Rachel getting into her Honda, moving fast like she was running. Preston came out maybe 30 seconds later, no shirt, barefoot. He caught up to her before she could get out of the parking lot, grabbed her arm through the driver's window, dragged her out of the car. She dropped a grocery bag she'd been holding. Eggs broke all over the sidewalk. She was crying. He was smiling. That's what I remember most. He was smiling. When he called police, I called 911, told them what I saw. 2 officers came maybe 20 minutes later, knocked on their door. Preston answered, calm as anything, told them it was a misunderstanding, that Rachel had been sleepwalking, like that even made sense. Rachel stood behind him and nodded. Didn't say a word. Officers left after maybe 8 minutes. Why he didn't do more? What was I supposed to do? I called the police. They came. They left. I'm just a delivery driver, man. I don't have any power. I don't have any authority. I told myself that if the cops weren't going to help, then there was nothing I could do. How he feels now. His hands shook as he spoke. His voice broke when he said Rachel's name. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. I knew something was wrong. I've known for months. Every time I saw her in the parking lot, I wanted to ask if she was okay. But I was scared. Scared of making it worse. Scared of getting involved. And now I find out he was planning to kill her, and God, I should have done more. What he added to the case. I have a Ring doorbell camera. It might have footage from that night. I can pull it if you need it. Frost nodded. We need it. Gladys Marchand, 67, retired teacher, Unit 12B, directly below Rachel's apartment. What she heard: furniture moving at all hours, raised voices, his voice mostly, I never heard her yell back, crying, a lot of crying late at night. 3 weeks ago I heard something heavy hit the floor at 2 in the morning. It shook my ceiling. I laid in bed listening and I knew someone was being hurt up there. What she saw: I saw Rachel 3 weeks ago in the parking lot. She was limping, trying to hide it, but I could tell. I stopped her, asked if she was okay. She smiled, this terrible fake smile, and said, I'm fine, just twisted my ankle. But her eyes were terrified, like she was begging me to see through the lie, but also begging me not to say anything. Why she didn't act. I called the police once, 4 months ago, after I heard her screaming. They came. They left. Nothing changed. I didn't call again because I didn't think it would help, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. Abusers punish their victims when people interfere. I taught school for 35 years, I've seen it, so I stayed quiet. And I hate myself for it. Her confession, her voice shook. She looked directly at Rachel when she spoke. I knew something was wrong. I heard it through my ceiling every single night for 11 months, and I chose not to see it because I didn't want the responsibility of what I'd have to do if I admitted what I knew. God forgive me, I should have done more. What she added to the case. I kept a journal. Dates, times, what I heard. I didn't know what else to do with it. I have 11 months of documentation if you need it. Badge's hand tightened on his pen. We need it. Jennifer Kowalski, 29, kindergarten teacher at Murfreesboro Elementary. Kalla's teacher. What she noticed. Kalla started changing about 8 months ago. She'd been a quiet kid, but happy. Then she got anxious, talked constantly at school, like she was afraid if she stopped talking she'd forget how. Drew pictures obsessively, always the same thing. 2 figures holding hands, sometimes a third figure far away, large and dark. What Kalla told her. 4 months ago, Kalla said Preston makes Mama cry. Just said it out of nowhere during snack time. I documented it immediately. Called Rachel for a parent conference. What happened at the conference? Rachel came in with Preston standing right next to her. I asked about Kalla's comment. Rachel smiled. But it wasn't a real smile. It was the smile people use when they're being watched. And said, Kalla has a big imagination. We're fine. Preston had his hand on her shoulder the whole time, squeezing. I could see the pressure in his fingers. Why she didn't push harder. Without the parent confirming abuse, without visible injuries on the child, my hands were tied. I filed the report with the school counselor. She reviewed it, categorized it as grief processing related to Kala's father's death. It went in a file. Nothing happened. Her guilt. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. That little girl was trying to tell me her mother was being hurt. And I believed the adult instead of the child. I believed the man who was hurting them because he looked normal and sounded reasonable and had all the right answers. I failed her. I failed both of them. What she added to the case. I have 8 months of documentation, behavioral changes, drawings, incident reports, all of it showing a pattern of a child in crisis, all of it ignored by everyone who should have helped. Frost took the file, added it to the evidence pile. 4:31 p.m. While the witness testimonies were being collected, Cypher was inside Preston's truck. Legally, with Preston's keys that Agent Rivera had secured during initial questioning, pulling every piece of digital evidence he could find. He found it in the glove box. Not hidden. Not encrypted. Just sitting there in a manila folder, like Preston never thought anyone would look. Printed bank statements from Cayman Islands International Bank. Account name, Harland Property Consulting LLC. Current balance, $84,400. Transaction history showing 17 deposits over 9 months. Each between $3,200 and $8,700. Small enough to avoid IRS reporting requirements. Large enough to add up fast. And beneath those statements, another set. Older, from 2010. Account name. Same LLC. Different balance, $280,000. Different victim name. Christine Elaine Harland. Cypher photographed everything. Sent the images to Agent Rivera. And then he found the laptop. 4:37 p.m. Preston's personal laptop, a Dell, password protected but with autosave enabled on his browser, gave up its secrets in under 4 minutes. Browser history from the past 6 months, 5 weeks ago. Life insurance policy requirements, Tennessee. How long after policy active before payout? Accidental death versus suicide insurance differences. 4 weeks ago. Undetectable household poisons. Symptoms arsenic poisoning versus natural causes. Forensic toxicology detection methods. 3 weeks ago. Staging suicide scene believable. How to fake suicide note handwriting. Police investigation timeline suspicious death. 2 months ago. Tennessee non-parent custody laws. Emergency custody rights step-parent. Guardian access to minor's inheritance, 7 months ago. Cayman Islands, LLC formation anonymous. IRS reporting requirements international transfers. Structuring deposits avoid bank reporting. Cypher's hands went still on the keyboard. This wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated murder with a financial motive and a step-by-step plan. Preston Harland had researched every angle, planned every detail. And he'd done it before 4:42 p.m. Agent Rivera reviewed the evidence on Cypher's laptop screen. Her expression went from professional neutrality to something colder. How did you access this? Laptop was in plain view in the living room. Preston left it open when he came to the door. Autosave on his browser means no password needed for history. And you didn't touch any files requiring passwords? Didn't need to. His stupidity did the work for us. Rivera pulled out her phone, made another call. I need a warrant for electronic devices. Probable cause, evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and pattern evidence connecting to a previous victim. Yes, I'll hold. She turned to Reaper. We're going to need Preston in custody, now, before he realizes how bad this is and runs. Reaper looked at Badge. Badge looked at Officer Portman, who'd been standing there for the past 20 minutes, looking progressively more ill as he realized exactly how badly he'd failed Rachel. Portman pulled out his handcuffs. I'll do it. 4:44 p.m. Preston Harland stood in his doorway, still believing he could talk his way out of this, still believing that his volunteer firefighter badge and his property manager credentials and his community standing would protect him the way they always had, still believing that charm and lies and a good attorney could make this disappear. Officer Portman approached. Preston Harland, you're under arrest for felony domestic violence, assault, false imprisonment, and financial fraud. You have the right to remain silent. This is a mistake. Preston's voice stayed calm. Reasonable. I don't know what Rachel told you, but she's been unstable since her husband died. She's been in grief counseling. She's been drinking. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I coach youth baseball. I'm a property manager with Riverbend for 9 years. You can't seriously... You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, my attorney will bury this department in litigation. You have no grounds. Portman's voice cut through, flat and final. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Preston's face changed. The charm dropped. The reasonable voice disappeared. What replaced it was rage. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know people. I have connections. This will be dismissed by Monday, and you'll be lucky to keep your job. Reaper stepped forward. Didn't touch Preston. Didn't threaten him. Just stood there. 6'3", 230 pounds, a lifetime of road and loss and hard-earned wisdom radiating from him like heat. And said very quietly, "Turn around." Preston turned around. Portman cuffed him, read him the rest of his rights while Preston's hands shook and his breathing went shallow and his carefully constructed world collapsed around him like a house made of cards. At 4:47 p.m., Preston Harland was placed in the back of a police cruiser. He asked once, quietly, "Can someone call my neighbor about my mail?" As if that were the thing that mattered. As if the world he'd built and the world he'd destroyed could wait while he sorted out his correspondence. But what Reaper and the brothers didn't know yet, what they were about to discover in the next hour, was that Preston Harland wasn't the end of this story. He was the middle. Because the phone call Preston had made last Sunday, the one Reaper had overheard at the hardware store, hadn't been to just anyone. It had been to his sister. Denise Harland Foster, 43, middle school teacher in Jacksonville, Florida, who'd known exactly what her brother was planning and had agreed to help. 4:52 p.m. Agent Rivera was photographing evidence in Preston's apartment when her phone rang. The number showed a Florida area code. She answered. "Special Agent Rivera." The voice on the other end was female, shaking, on the edge of panic. "My name is Denise Foster. I'm Preston Harland's sister. I just saw the news alert about his arrest and I need to talk to someone. I need to tell you what I know." Rivera's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead." "He called me last Sunday. Said I needed to be ready to take Calla in 2-3 months, maybe. Said Rachel was getting worse, that she might hurt herself. He asked if I'd come to Tennessee for the funeral and custody stuff. I said yes. Silence. Rivera's hand tightened on the phone. You said yes to taking custody of a child after her mother's funeral, a funeral that hadn't happened yet. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like you were aware your brother was planning to kill Rachel Brennan, and you agreed to facilitate the aftermath. Denise started crying. I didn't think he'd really do it. He's my brother. He's done terrible things before, but I never thought... I told myself he was just stressed, just venting, that he wouldn't actually... Before? Rivera's voice sharpened. What do you mean, before? His first wife, Christine. She left him in 2010. There was a big fight over money. He told me she was trying to steal from him, but after she left, he told me once, he was drunk, that he'd handled it better this time. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't ask. Rivera closed her eyes. Better this time. I think he meant he learned from his mistakes. With Christine, he let her leave. With Rachel, he wasn't going to make that mistake again. Did he tell you about the money? He said there was about 180,000. Said it would all go to Cala's care. I asked how I'd manage it, and he said he was setting up a trust. You asked about the money. Yes. I needed to know if I could afford... You needed to know how much your brother's murder plan was worth. Denise broke completely, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. I didn't think of it like that. I swear to God I didn't. He's my brother, family. I thought I was helping. I thought... Rivera's voice went ice cold. You thought what, exactly? That a healthy 32-year-old woman would conveniently die of natural causes right when your brother needed her to? That a 5-year-old would need a new home just by coincidence? You knew. Maybe you didn't let yourself see it clearly, but you knew. Silence on the line. Just ragged breathing. Rivera pulled the phone from her ear, signaled to one of her fellow agents. I need a trace on this call. Florida number. And I need Jacksonville field office to pick up Denise Harland Foster for questioning. Possible conspiracy, accessory before the fact. She returned to the call. Mrs. Foster, where are you right now? Home? Jacksonville. Stay there. Federal agents will be at your door within the hour. If you leave, if you destroy any evidence, if you contact your brother, you will be charged with obstruction. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Because here's what you need to know. Preston didn't just plan to kill Rachel. He researched poisons. He researched staging suicide. He had a step-by-step plan and a timeline. And you were part of that plan. You don't get to pretend you didn't know. The call ended. Rivera turned to Reaper, who'd been standing in the doorway listening. We have a second conspirator, his sister. She's in Florida. Will she talk? She already is. Fear makes people confess, and she's terrified. 5:14 p.m. Clubhouse War Room. 40 minutes after Preston's arrest, 23 Hell's Angels gathered in the Iron Valley Clubhouse. Rachel and Cala were safe, placed in protective custody with a victim advocate, temporarily housed in a secure location while the investigation unfolded. Preston was in county jail, bail hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. But something about this case didn't sit right with Badge. He spread the evidence across the table. Bank statements, browser history, insurance documents. Look at the pattern, he said, pointing to the dates. Preston moves in with Rachel 9 months ago. 4 months later, he's added to her bank account. 6 months after that, he starts researching poisons and custody laws. It's methodical. Practiced. Cypher opened his laptop, I pulled records on the Cayman LLC. It was formed in 2007. That's 18 years ago. Preston didn't create this for Rachel. He's been using it for nearly 2 decades. Stitch leaned forward. How many victims? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Cypher's fingers flew across the keyboard. Public records, marriage licenses, divorce filings, property transfers. And then he found it. First wife, Christine Elaine Harland. Married 2006, divorced 2011. Settlement records show she was originally supposed to receive $340,000 from her parents' estate, split with Preston in the divorce. Final settlement, she got $60,000. Preston claimed the rest was spent on marital expenses. Badge did the math. He stole $280,000 from her and transferred it to the same Cayman account he's using for Rachel's money. Prophet spoke quietly from the corner. He's done this before. And he would have done it again if Calla hadn't written that note. The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle idled and cut off. And every man in that room understood, without saying it out loud, that they weren't just trying to save Rachel. They were trying to stop something that had already destroyed one life and was in the process of destroying another. Reaper's voice cut through the quiet. We need to find Christine. She needs to know her ex-husband just got arrested for trying to do to someone else what he did to her. On it, Cypher said, already typing. 5:31 p.m. Florida. 2 FBI agents knocked on the door of a modest townhouse in Jacksonville. Denise Harland Foster answered, her face blotchy from crying. Denise Foster? Yes. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding your brother's arrest. She didn't resist. Didn't ask for a lawyer. Just grabbed her purse and followed them to the car. 5:47 p.m. Interrogation room, Jacksonville field office. Special Agent Marcus Hammond sat across from Denise. Set a recorder on the table. This interview is being recorded. You have the right to an attorney. I don't want an attorney. I want to tell you everything. Hammond paused. Everything? Everything I should have said months ago. She talked for 43 minutes straight. Here's what she told them. Denise had known her brother was abusive since 2009, when Christine had called her crying, begging for help leaving. Denise had told Christine to work it out, because marriage is hard. When Christine finally escaped in 2011, Denise had believed Preston's story that Christine was mentally unstable and trying to steal from him. She'd chosen her brother over the truth. In 2024, when Preston started dating Rachel, Denise had felt uneasy, but said nothing. When Preston called last Sunday and said, I need you ready for Calla in 2-3 months, she'd known something was wrong. When he said for the funeral and custody stuff, she'd known exactly what he meant. But she'd told herself, he won't really do it. He's just venting. He's just stressed. When he mentioned $180,000, she'd asked how she'd manage it financially. She'd asked about the money, and in asking, she'd confirmed her participation. I'm a middle school teacher, she said, her voice breaking. I tell kids every day to speak up if they see something wrong. And when my own brother was planning to murder a woman I'd never met, I stayed silent because he's family, because I didn't want to believe it, because it was easier to pretend I didn't understand what he was telling me. Agent Hammond's expression didn't soften. You had months to come forward. Multiple chances. You chose not to. I know. A 5-year-old child had to save her own mother because you wouldn't. Denise covered her face with her hands. I know. 6:03 p.m. Clubhouse. Cypher looked up from his laptop. Found Christine. Reaper crossed the room. Where? Portland, Oregon. Name change, Christine Ellison. Works as a paralegal. Restraining order against Preston still active. Filed in Tennessee in 2011. Transferred to Oregon when she moved. Call her. Cypher hesitated. And say what? The truth. That her ex-husband was arrested for trying to do to another woman what he did to her, and that we need her testimony to make sure he never gets out. 6:18 p.m. Portland, Oregon. Christine Ellison's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Ellison, my name is David Miller. I'm calling from Tennessee on behalf of a woman named Rachel Brennan. Your ex-husband was arrested today for domestic violence, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. We found evidence that links his current crimes to what he did to you in 2010. We need your help. Silence. Then quietly. Is she alive, the woman he was with? Yes, because her 5-year-old daughter asked a stranger for help. Christine's breath caught. I tried to warn people. When I left, I told his family. I told mutual friends. No one believed me. They said I was bitter, vindictive, making it up. We believe you now, and we need you to testify, to show the pattern, to make sure he never does this to anyone else. Another pause. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. On one condition. What's that? I want to meet Rachel. I want to tell her that leaving was the right choice, that she's not crazy, that he's the monster, not her. I'll arrange it. 6:34 p.m. Murfreesboro County Jail. Preston Harland sat in a holding cell, staring at the wall. His attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Kellerman who specialized in defending white-collar criminals, sat across from him in the consultation room. They have your browser history, your bank records, your sister's confession, a previous victim willing to testify, and 83 witnesses who saw you get arrested. This is bad, Preston. How bad? Federal charges bad. Interstate fraud. Conspiracy. If they can prove intent to murder, we're looking at 25 to life. Preston's hands curled into fists. What about bail? Judge is going to see you as a flight risk with offshore accounts and a history of financial manipulation. I'd be surprised if they set bail at all, and if they do, it'll be high enough that you can't make it. I have money, in Cayman Islands, which the FBI is currently freezing. You have access to exactly nothing. Preston's face went white. This can't be happening. Kellerman leaned back. It is happening. And unless you have something to trade, some piece of information that helps the prosecution, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Preston said nothing, because he had nothing left to trade. Every card he'd held had been played. Every lie had been exposed. Every person he'd manipulated had turned against him. And all because a 5-year-old girl had written 6 words in purple crayon and trusted a stranger to keep a promise. 6:51 p.m. Federal Building. Agent Rivera assembled the full scope of the case in a conference room. Present, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, Forensic Accountant Martin Price, Victim Advocate Sarah Reeves, and Badge representing the Hells Angels collected evidence. Rivera laid it out. 2 victims, Christine Harland, 2006 to 2011, lost $280,000. Rachel Brennan, 2023 to present, $84,000 stolen so far, planned murder to access remaining $183,000. Timeline suggests Preston has been running this con for 18 years. Target vulnerable women with money, gain access to finances, isolate, abuse, steal. When they try to leave, either let them go broke or eliminate them. Evidence includes 17 financial transfers, browser history showing murder planning, recorded phone call with sister conspiring to take custody post-murder, previous victim testimony, medical documentation of abuse, witness statements from neighbors and teachers, and voluntary confession from accomplice. Charges were filing: conspiracy to commit murder, felony assault, false imprisonment, financial fraud, elder abuse for stealing from his mother. Badge interrupted. Wait, his mother? Rivera pulled up another document. Found it buried in the account records. In 2019, Preston's mother, Dorothy Harland, died of complications from dementia. She had $57,000 in savings. Preston was executor of her estate. The money disappeared into the Cayman account. His sister confirmed their mother's estate was supposed to be split between them. Denise never received her share. Prophet closed his eyes. He stole from his own mother. While she was dying of dementia and couldn't fight back, yes. The room fell silent. Walsh, the prosecutor, spoke first. Total victim count? 3 confirmed. Christine, Dorothy, Rachel. Potential others we're still investigating. Total financial damages. $421,000 documented, possibly more. Recommended charges? Rivera didn't hesitate. Federal conspiracy to commit murder, interstate financial fraud, elder abuse, felony assault, false imprisonment. We pursue maximum sentencing. No plea deals. This man has spent 18 years destroying lives. It ends now. Walsh nodded. Agreed. We go to trial, and we make sure every detail is on the record, so this never happens again. 7:08 p.m. The final scope. 3 victims. Christine Elaine Harland, 2006 to 2011. $280,000 stolen. Dorothy Harland, Preston's mother, 2019. $57,000 stolen. Rachel Marie Brennan, 2023 to present. $84,000 stolen. Murder planned for remaining $183,000. Total financial damages: $604,000 across 18 years evidence chain. 17 documented financial transfers to offshore accounts. Browser history: 23 searches related to murder planning. Life insurance policy forged signature. $250,000 payout with Preston as beneficiary. Denise Foster's recorded confession. Christine Harland's testimony. Previous victim pattern. Medical records. Rachel's injuries documented witness statements. 4 people who saw abuse and were ignored by police reports. 4 failed interventions showing systemic failure. Kala's kindergarten records. 8 months of behavioral changes and cry for help drawings, charges filed, federal and state. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Interstate financial fraud, elder abuse. Theft from deceased mother. Felony assault. Rachel's injuries. False imprisonment. Zip tie restraints. Locked doors. Child endangerment. Kala's exposure to violence. Forgery. Life insurance documents. Structuring. Financial transfers designed to avoid IRS reporting. Timeline to trial: 4 to 7 months. Bail recommendation: denied. Flight risk: offshore accounts. Danger to victim. Sentencing recommendation if convicted: 19 to 25 years federal prison. No parole eligibility. For 15 years. Reaper stood in the conference room, listening to the scope of what they'd uncovered. 18 years. 3 victims. $604,000. 1 5-year-old girl with a purple crayon who'd stopped it all. Agent Rivera turned to him. Without your intervention, Rachel would be dead within the month. Kala would be in Denise's custody. Preston would have the money, and no one would have questioned any of it because he'd built the perfect cover. Reaper's voice was quiet. It wasn't me. It was Calla. It was both of you. She asked. You answered. A pause. We'll be in touch about trial testimony. You, your brothers, the witnesses, every son who helped document this. We need all of it. You'll have it. Rivera extended her hand. Thank you for doing what the system should have done. Reaper shook it, but he didn't smile. Because the truth, the part that made his chest heavy, was that the system hadn't failed because it was broken. It had failed because it was designed to move slowly, carefully, legally. And sometimes people didn't have time for slow. Sometimes a 5-year-old ran out of time in exactly the span it took to write 6 words in purple crayon and push them into a stranger's saddlebag. And sometimes the only thing standing between a victim and a grave was someone willing to answer faster than the paperwork could catch up. 7:23 p.m. Thursday, 3 days after the arrest. Stitch pulled his truck into the parking lot of Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Rachel in the passenger seat, Calla in the back. Rachel hadn't been to a doctor in 17 months. Not since Preston had forbidden it after she'd tried to show an ER physician the bruises on her ribs, and he'd dragged her out of the waiting room claiming she was having an episode. Now she sat in Stitch's truck, staring at the hospital entrance, her hands shaking. I don't know if I can do this. Stitch turned off the engine, looked at her with the same calm he'd used on soldiers who'd been blown apart by IEDs, and didn't think they'd survive the medevac flight. You can, and you will, because Calla needs to see her mama taking care of herself. You understand? Rachel nodded. Calla reached forward from the back seat, put her small hand on her mother's shoulder. Didn't say anything. Just touch. That was enough. The exam room was small, sterile, too bright. Dr. Lisa Morgan, 41, trauma specialist who'd seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the specific pattern of injuries designed to stay hidden, entered with a tablet and a gentle expression. Rachel, I'm Dr. Morgan. I understand you've been through something terrible. I'm here to help document your injuries and make sure you're healing properly. Is that okay? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Stitch had brought something with him, a purple stuffed elephant he'd picked up from the hospital gift shop on the way in, small enough to fit in Calla's hands. He handed it to Calla now, crouching to her eye level in the hallway. Your mama's going to be in there for about 30 minutes. This guy right here? His name is whatever you want to name him. And his job is to be brave while you wait. Can you help him with that? Calla took the elephant, nodded. I'll name him Reaper, like the man with the motorcycle. Stitch's throat tightened. That's a good name. Inside the exam room, Dr. Morgan worked methodically, photographed the healing rib fractures, 3 of them, lateral left side, 9 days into healing, already starting to calcify incorrectly because Rachel hadn't had medical care when it mattered. Documented the rope burns on both wrists, faded now, but the scarring pattern was unmistakable. Ligature marks from zip tie restraints, consistent with prolonged binding. Examined the spiral fracture on Rachel's right forearm, 17 days old, healing at a 15-degree angle that would cause chronic pain and reduced mobility for the rest of her life, unless surgically corrected. This fracture, Dr. Morgan said quietly, was caused by a twisting force. Someone grabbed your arm and torqued it. Is that correct? Rachel nodded. He was trying to get into Calla's bedroom. I blocked the door. He twisted my arm until I heard it snap. Dr. Morgan's jaw tightened. but her voice stayed gentle. "We can fix this. It'll require surgery, pins and plates, about 4 hours in the OR, 6 weeks of recovery. But you'll regain full function. You won't have to live with this pain forever." Rachel started crying, not from fear, from relief. Someone had finally said, "You won't have to live with this forever." Dr. Morgan set down her tablet, pulled up a chair, sat across from Rachel at eye level. "I need you to hear something. You survived. That's not a small thing. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form. And now you're going to heal, not just your bones, all of it. It's going to take time. It's going to be hard. But you're going to heal." Rachel looked up, mascara streaking down her face. "How do you know?" "Because you're here. Because you let your daughter ask for help. Because you walked out of that apartment and didn't go back. That's how I know." When they walked out 30 minutes later, Stitch stood up from the waiting room chair where he'd been sitting with Calla, watching her whisper secrets to the purple elephant. Dr. Morgan handed Rachel a folder thick with referrals: orthopedic surgeon for the arm, physical therapist for the ribs, trauma counselor for everything else. And at the bottom, written in Dr. Morgan's handwriting, "You did the hard part. The rest is just healing." Saturday morning, 9:47 a.m., Prophet's kitchen. Rachel and Calla sat at a wooden table that had hosted 100 Sunday breakfasts, 1,000 cups of coffee, and more confessions than any church confessional. Prophet set down 2 plates: scrambled eggs, toast, strawberries cut into quarters. Simple, normal, the kind of breakfast a 5-year-old should have every morning without fear. Calla stared at the plate, didn't touch it. Rachel watched her daughter, understanding exactly what was happening. For 13 months, Preston had controlled when they ate, how much, what food was allowed. He'd locked the pantry, rationed portions, used food as punishment and reward, and now Calla was staring at a plate of eggs like it might disappear. Prophet pulled up a chair, sat down with his own plate, took a bite of toast. Casual, unhurried. "You know what I like about Saturday mornings?" he said to no one in particular. "Nobody's rushing. No clock to watch, no schedule to keep, just breakfast and time." He took another bite. Calla watched him, then slowly picked up her fork, took a small bite of eggs, waited. Nothing happened. No one took the plate away. No one told her she'd had enough. No timer started. She took another bite. And another. Rachel's hand found the edge of the table, gripping it so hard her knuckles went white, trying not to cry as she watched her daughter eat breakfast without fear for the first time in a year. The kitchen smelled like butter and coffee. Morning light came through the window at an angle that made the dust motes visible, floating slow and peaceful. And for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, Rachel Brennan let herself believe that maybe normal was still possible. Sunday afternoon, 2:14 p.m. The duplex sat on a quiet street in a neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors' names. 2 bedrooms, small yard, porch with a swing. Rent, covered for 6 months by money the Iron Valley chapter had raised. $18,340 from 12 different chapters across 3 states, donated in 48 hours after word spread about what had happened. The landlord, a woman named Margaret Torres, Badge's cousin, who'd survived her own abusive marriage 20 years ago, handed Rachel the key. "First and last month, utilities included. After 6 months, we'll figure out what you can afford. But for now, You just focus on healing. Understand? Rachel took the key, stood in the doorway of the duplex. Her duplex. A place where Preston Harland had never been. A place where the locks were hers. A place where Calla could have her own bedroom with a door that only locked from the inside. Calla ran past her mother, through the living room, into the smaller bedroom on the left. Called out, "Mama, there's a window! I can see a tree!" Rachel started crying again. Frost appeared in the doorway behind her, carrying 2 boxes, one labeled kitchen, the other labeled Calla's room. We took the liberty of getting some basics: dishes, towels, sheets. Nothing fancy, but enough to get you started. Behind him, Hammer carried a mattress. Cypher carried a small desk. Prophet carried bags of groceries. Stitch carried a first aid kit the size of a tackle box. They moved through the duplex like a coordinated unit, setting up a home in 40 minutes flat. When they were done, Rachel stood in the kitchen, her kitchen, and looked at the 5 men who'd spent their Sunday turning an empty space into a place where she and Calla could start over. "I don't know how to thank you." Badge spoke for all of them. "You don't thank us. You just live. You raise that little girl. You build a life he can't touch. That's the thanks." They stood on the porch, sunset turning the sky orange and pink. Calla sat on the porch swing, the purple elephant, named Reaper, clutched in her arms. One by one, the brothers said their goodbyes. Cypher knelt, pulled a business card from his wallet, handed it to Calla. "This has my phone number. You ever need help with homework, math, science, anything with computers? You call me. Anytime. I mean it." Calla took the card carefully. "Even multiplication?" "Especially multiplication." Hammer crouched next, impossibly huge next to this tiny 5-year-old. "You know what you did, writing that note? That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. You remember that when things get hard. You're braver than you know." Frost was next. He didn't crouch, just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at Calla with the expression of someone who'd spent 9 years watching kids slip through cracks and had finally caught one before she fell all the way through. "You saved your mom. Not the police, not the system. You. Don't let anyone tell you different." Prophet stepped forward last. Looked at Rachel. "You're going to have hard days. Days where the fear comes back. Days where you wonder if you made the right choice. Days where the trauma makes you doubt everything. When those days come, and they will come, you call one of us. You understand? You don't fight this alone." Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Stitch handed her a folder. "Surgery scheduled for next Friday. Dr. Morgan's office will call you Wednesday to confirm. Physical therapy starts 2 weeks after that. Trauma counseling. There's a therapist named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. She specializes in domestic violence recovery. First 3 sessions are covered. After that, we'll figure it out." He paused. "You're not a burden. You're not a project. You're family now. That's what this means." He tapped the folder. "We don't walk away." 7:41 p.m. The motorcycles pulled away one by one. 5 men who'd spent their weekend building safety for a woman and child they'd met 4 days ago. Rachel stood on the porch of her duplex, her home, and watched them go. Calla was inside, arranging her new bedroom, talking to the purple elephant about which shelf should hold books and which should hold toys. The street was quiet, safe, normal. Rachel pulled out her phone, looked at the card Reaper had given her in the hardware store parking lot. The one that said, "If anything changes, if he escalates, If you feel unsafe for even 1 second, you call. She saved the number, under a contact name that made her throat tight. Promise Keeper. Then she went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in 13 months, she went to sleep knowing that the lock was there to keep danger out, not to keep her in. Reaper stood outside the duplex at 11:34 p.m. on a Tuesday. He hadn't planned to be there. He'd been riding back from a run to Nashville, took a wrong turn, and found himself on Rachel's street without meaning to. The porch light was on. Through the living room window, he could see movement. Rachel, awake, pacing. He should leave. This wasn't his business anymore. The system had taken over. Rachel was safe. Calla was safe. Preston was in jail awaiting trial. But something made him park his bike, walk up to the porch, knock softly. Rachel answered, still dressed, eyes red from crying. "I can't sleep," she said without preamble. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing in the doorway. I know he's locked up. I know he can't get to me, but my brain doesn't believe it yet." Reaper nodded. "That's normal. Trauma doesn't follow logic. It's going to take time." "How much time?" "However long it takes. There's no schedule for healing." Rachel wrapped her arms around herself. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if Calla hadn't written that note. If you hadn't found it. If you'd just thrown it away thinking it was trash." "But I didn't." "But you could have." Reaper was quiet for a moment. Then, 48 years ago, I tried to save my mother from my father. I swung a fireplace poker at his legs because he had her by the throat, and she was turning purple. I was 6 years old. The poker hit him. He dropped her. And then he turned on me. Broke my collarbone. My mother survived. But she lost 90% vision in her left eye from that night. For the rest of her life, every time she looked at the world, she only saw half of it. And I carried that. The guilt that I wasn't strong enough. Rachel's eyes widened. "You were 6. I know that now. Took me 30 years to believe it. But when Calla handed me that note, when she asked if I was a good man or a bad man, I saw myself. A kid trying to protect a parent. A kid who was too small to fight, but brave enough to try anyway. And I promised myself that this time I would be strong enough." He met her eyes. "You asked how much time it takes to heal. I don't know. But I know you take it one day at a time, one night at a time. And when the fear comes back, you remember. He's behind bars. You're not. That's not luck. That's justice." Rachel nodded. Reaper turned to leave. Stopped. "Rachel, you did everything right. You called the police 4 times. You tried to leave 4 times. You protected Calla the best way you knew how. None of this is your fault. You understand?" "I'm trying to." "Keep trying. Eventually you'll believe it." He walked back to his bike. Didn't look back. But he felt lighter somehow. Like a promise 48 years old had finally been kept. The courtroom was packed. Federal trial. United States versus Preston Alton Harland. Rachel sat in the witness box, hands folded, voice steady. She'd spent 6 months in trauma therapy, 4 months in physical therapy recovering from surgery on her arm, 14 months learning how to sleep without fear. And now she was here, telling her story to a jury of 12 people who would decide if Preston Harland would ever walk free again. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh stood before her. "Miss Brennan, can you describe the moment you realized your daughter had asked a stranger for help?" Rachel's voice didn't shake. I saw the note in his hand. Purple crayon, Calla's handwriting, and I realized my 5-year-old had done what I'd been too afraid to do. She'd told the truth. What made you too afraid? He'd convinced me no one would believe me. He was a volunteer firefighter, a property manager, a coach. Everyone loved him. I was just the widow who couldn't cope with her grief. That's the story he told. And for 13 months, everyone believed it. But not anymore. No, not anymore. Walsh pulled up a photograph on the screen. Rachel's ribs, the bruises, the healing fractures. Did Preston Harland cause these injuries? Yes. Did he prevent you from seeking medical care? Yes. Did he threaten your daughter? Yes. Did you believe he would kill you? Rachel looked directly at Preston, sitting at the defense table in a suit that made him look harmless. Yes. I believed he would kill me, stage it as suicide, take custody of Calla, and steal the money my late husband left for her future. And no one would have questioned it, because he'd spent 13 months building the narrative that I was unstable. The jury watched her. 12 faces. Some angry, some sad. All paying attention. Rachel continued. But my daughter didn't believe that story. She believed someone would help if she asked. And she was right. The trial lasted 7 days. Christine Harland, now Christine Ellison, testified about the pattern of financial abuse and isolation she'd endured from 2006 to 2011. Denise Foster testified about her brother's phone call and her own complicity. Dr. Morgan testified about Rachel's injuries and the medical evidence of prolonged abuse. Cipher testified about the browser history and the financial records. Badge testified about the 4 police calls and why the system had failed. And Calla, now 6 years old, accompanied by a child psychologist, testified in a closed session about what she'd witnessed. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 17 minutes. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentencing: 22 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 17 years. When the judge read the sentence, Rachel didn't cry, didn't smile, just closed her eyes and breathed. Outside the courthouse, Frost waited. He'd taken 3 days off work to be there for the verdict. When Rachel walked out, he handed her an envelope. What's this? Job offer. Victim advocate position with Tennessee Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They're looking for someone with lived experience. Training provided. Salary's decent. You'd be helping other women navigate the same system that failed you. Rachel opened the envelope, read the letter, looked up. Why me? Because you understand what it feels like from the inside, and because Calla needs to see her mother turn survival into purpose. Rachel folded the letter carefully. I'll think about it. 3 weeks later, she accepted. The conference room at the Nashville Family Justice Center was full. 23 women, all survivors of domestic violence, all participating in a new program designed to help them rebuild their lives. Rachel Brennan, now Rachel Brennan, certified victim advocate, and Tennessee Coalition Against Domestic Violence, stood at the front of the room. She was 36 now. Her arm had healed completely. Full function restored. Her ribs no longer ached when it rained. The nightmares had faded to once a month, instead of every night. And she'd helped 47 women escape situations like the one she'd been trapped in. 47 women who'd called hotlines, filed restraining orders, and walked into safe houses because someone who'd been there before told them, "You can survive this." Today, she was training a new advocate. A young woman, 29, soft-spoken, nervous, named Maria Santos. Maria had escaped her abuser 6 months ago, was still jumping at loud noises, still checking over her shoulder, still learning to believe she was safe. Rachel recognized the look. She'd worn it for 2 years. After the training session ended, Rachel pulled Maria aside. "You're going to have moments where you doubt this, where you think you're not strong enough to help other people when you're still healing yourself. When those moments come, I want you to remember something." "What's that?" 4 years ago, I weighed 117 pounds, had 3 broken ribs, and believed I was going to die in an apartment in Murfreesboro. Today, I train advocates, testify in court, and help women find safe housing. That's not because I'm special. It's because someone helped me. And now I help others. That's how this works. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "What if I'm not ready?" "You're ready enough, and you'll get more ready every day." That evening, Rachel drove to Calla's elementary school. Calla was 10 now, 4th grade, honor roll, student council representative, bright, confident, safe. She still had the purple elephant, Reaper, on her bed. Still remembered the day a stranger kept a promise. Rachel picked her up from after-school art club. Calla climbed into the car, backpack heavy with books. "How was school?" "Good." "We're doing a project on people who inspire us. I picked you." Rachel's throat tightened. "Me?" "Yeah, because you help people. Like the man with the motorcycle helped us." Rachel pulled out of the parking lot, drove toward home. The same duplex they'd moved into 4 years ago, now theirs. Mortgage paid off by settlement money from a lawsuit against Preston for emotional damages. "You know what I learned from all of this?" Rachel said quietly. "What?" "That asking for help isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do." Calla nodded, looking out the window. "I know. That's why I wrote the note." And in that moment, Rachel understood something she'd been trying to articulate for 4 years. Her daughter hadn't just saved her life. She'd taught her how to live it. Reaper stood in his garage on a Saturday morning, working on his bike. Routine maintenance, oil change, checking the brake lines. Normal. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He almost deleted it. But something made him open it. The message had a photo attached. A young woman, mid-20s, professional clothes, confident smile, standing in front of a sign that read, "Tennessee Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Nashville Office." The text below the photo read, "You don't know me, but 4 years ago a woman named Rachel Brennan helped me escape my abuser. She told me someone once kept a promise to her daughter, and that's why she keeps promises to women like me. I start law school in the fall, family law. I'm going to help women fight for custody, for safety, for justice, because someone helped Rachel, and Rachel helped me, and now I'll help the next one. Thank you for starting the chain." Reaper stared at the message for a long time, set down his wrench, walked into his office, a small room in the back of the clubhouse, walls covered with photographs and ride maps and chapter rosters. On the wall next to his desk hung 2 drawings. The first, a crayon drawing from 1988. His daughter Melissa, age 7, before the car accident that killed her. 2 figures holding hands, one small, one large, both smiling. The second, a drawing from 4 years ago, Calla's drawing, sent to him 6 months after the arrest. 2 figures holding hands, one small, one large, both smiling. Purple crayon, the same color. Reaper had spent 48 years carrying the weight of not being strong enough to save his mother when he was 6. But in helping Calla save hers, maybe, just maybe, he'd finally learned the truth. Strength isn't about being big enough to fight alone. It's about being brave enough to ask for help, and wise enough to answer when someone asks you. Here's the truth about this story that nobody talks about. The system didn't save Rachel Brennan. A 5-year-old with a purple crayon did. But here's the deeper truth. The system wasn't designed to be fast. It was designed to be thorough, legal, procedural, built to protect rights, including the rights of the accused, even when that slowness costs the victim time they don't have. The system isn't broken. It just moves at the speed of paperwork, while people bleed at the speed of right now. So what fills the gap? People. People who see something wrong and refuse to look away. People who believe a child's handwriting more than an adult's excuses. People who show up with 83 motorcycles and say, "Not on our watch." If you've ever walked past someone who needed help and told yourself it wasn't your business, I understand. I get it. Intervening is scary, messy, uncertain. But so is living with the knowledge that you could have helped and chose not to. You don't need 83 motorcycles to change a story. You need one choice, the choice to see, to believe, to act. Rachel called for help 4 times, and the system said, "Not enough evidence." Kala wrote 6 words, and a stranger said, "I believe you." That's the difference. So here's what I'm asking. If you see a child who's too quiet, too careful, too afraid, pay attention. If you hear a neighbor screaming and tell yourself it's not your business, make it your business. If someone reaches out for help in whatever broken, desperate way they can manage, answer. You might be the only person who does. And that might be the difference between a woman dying in an apartment in Tennessee and a woman training advocates to help 47 others. Subscribe to Gentle Biker Official if you believe every person deserves someone who answers when they ask for help. Comment and tell me, who was your protector when you needed one? Or who do you wish had been? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the scariest-looking person in a parking lot is exactly who a desperate child needs, and sometimes a purple crayon and 6 words are enough to topple an empire built on lies. Rachel Brennan stood in that hardware store parking lot 4 years ago, convinced she was going to die. Today, she stands in conference rooms, courtrooms, and safe houses, telling women, "You will survive this." Kala rose. Brennan held a purple crayon in a hardware store parking lot 4 years ago, believing someone might help if she asked. Today, she holds her head high, knowing she saved her mother's life before she could even spell the word courage. And Gideon Reaper Vance rode away from a hardware store 4 years ago with a note in his vest pocket, finally understanding what his mother had tried to tell him when he was 19. "You were 6 years old, baby. You tried. That's more than most grown men would have done." He'd spent 48 years believing he'd failed. But in keeping a promise to a 5-year-old in overalls with a purple crayon, he'd finally learned the truth. Sometimes being strong enough means knowing when to ask for help. And sometimes it means being there when someone does. The purple crayon is still in Reaper's office, next to Melissa's drawing from 1988, next to Kala's drawing from 4 years ago. A reminder that some promises, the ones that matter most, are written in crayon by people too young to know they're changing the world. But change it anyway.